You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Sarah Strohmeyer on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called Do I Know You? And this is a fantastic thriller that it has one of the best premises that I've encountered in quite a while. And I'm recommending this book to everyone. I love it so much. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Well, thanks for having me. I really like to talk about writing and being an author, so I'm really excited about this podcast.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. Before we get into talking about all the great stuff that we're going to get into today, Sarah, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Well, probably like a lot of authors, I have that engraved in my brain, and I even know the date because it was the date that former Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned in 1972. Stay with me here. So I was 10 years old. It was October 10th, 1972, and I wrote a pledge to myself. And I think I had just finished Little Woman, Louisa May Alcott, so I was kind of in that mode, and wrote a letter to myself saying that I would become an author. And then I sent it to my brother, who was much older than I, was a student at Boston University, and he wrote back a lovely note on the title page of The Iceman Cometh. So there you go. I absolutely remember that clear as day. I think I was in fifth grade.
I've heard lots of answers to that question and lots of varied answers. The first time ever on the show in 1,200 episodes that Spiro Agnew has factored into that question. That's amazing, and you're on the Author Stories Mount Rushmore for that answer, for sure.
Spiro.
Sarah, I know a lot of people have definitive moments that they can point to, and some people don't have a definitive moment, but they have this realization at some point in their life that they are storytellers, and that there will be a book that comes out someday. Most people envision multiple books, but most people have at least the idea that they will publish a book. What happens to most people, though, is life tends to, muddy the waters, and, very few people have the singular pursuit that this is what I'm going to do and all I'm going to do. And, you get busy with living life and starting a family and paying bills and all of the stuff that comes with it. But writing always has a way of coming back around and coming back into your life. What has your experience been like?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and certainly a common scenario. I did not start publishing books until I was the mother of two young kids while I had a full-time job. So I was working as a reporter in Vermont, and I had just put my husband through law school. He had kind of had an epiphany in his early 30s that that's what he wanted to do, and we had pulled up roots and moved from Ohio to Vermont. And I remember there was a moment where I said, and I'd always had these books clicking around my head, I guess, since the Spiro Agnew retirement day. And I thought, I'm 35 years old, and I have got to do it now, or I'm never going to do it. And there were a couple of moments that I think were key. One was, I remember reading an author, I wish I could remember her name, and she said, look, you just find space. If it's in the boiler room next to the heater, you just find that space and you write. And that's what I did. I would put in a full day's work and come home and do dinner, and I would get up from the table and I would actually return to my office down in the state capitol here in Montpelier and write. And I had a lot of friends at the time who also kind of quit their jobs and wrote, and a lot of times they got overwhelmed. And there were a couple of incidents that spurred me along. One was the day that my brother died. He died at the age of 45, and it was in the summer, and I was assigned to do obit duty, believe it or not, on that day for this newspaper in New Hampshire. And I called my editor and said, my brother died. And he said, I know, it's a summer schedule. So can you come in anyway?
Oh, wow.
And I came to work, and I was taking the obituaries of other people who had died. And I just broke down in tears. I mean, I think I made 3 hours. And then I thought, you know what? This journalism, I've grown up in it, but I'm not. I'm better than this. I'm not going to do this. I'm never going to have this experience again. So every time I would kind of, oh, do I really need to? I'm so tired. Or I would remember that moment, and I would get my butt in that chair and write. So that was, I think there are two different things we're talking about here. We're talking about the story that's inside our heads, which we love, and the characters who we develop and create, and the plot and the arcs. And then there's actually getting it down on paper or in a computer screen. And those are two very different activities. So I don't mean to say I wasn't a writer at that time, but until you get it down on paper, until you get to that 90,000 words and press, print and start going over and start redrafting, you're not a writer.
Right. And absolutely valid. Sarah, that first book that you started writing, was that the first book that you had published?
No. So there's another wacky story here. I think my entire writing career is just built on bizarre stories. But when I had kid number 2, I was 32 years old, and we had moved to the woods of Vermont, and my world kind of closed in. My husband was studying for the bar exam, and I was stuck at home with a child who would scream from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. every night, and he just had horrible colic. He's a wonderful kid. And I was also with these kind of, I'm going to try to be as nice about this, politically correct mothers as possible. And they were distressed that my 4-year-old daughter, who's extreme feminist right now, was playing with Barbies. And they would ask me to put Barbies away. But, could you please put the Barbies away? And so I, in my kind of postpartum insanity, wrote this book called Barbie Unbound, a parody of the Barbie obsession. I couldn't get any publishers to go with it because they were all afraid of lawsuits, but this lovely lesbian feminist press in Norwich, Vermont said, we'll do it. And so they did. And we were immediately covered by the Wall Street Journal, who said, you're going to be sued. And we weren't. And it was this weird cult hit. And it was a lot of fun to do. I shot it with a photographer from the paper on our spare time. And we had Barbie and all these literary and modern, now it's all derivative, it's all been done, but at the time no one would do it because Mattel wouldn't touch it. But it was a great hit. So that was what started my illustrious literary career, was Barbie.
That's such an amazing story. Sarah, I know that you worked as a reporter, and I've met a number of people doing this show that also began their career as reporters or journalists, and I'm always fascinated by the ability to do that job and then write fiction. Do you find that there are any tools that you picked up along the way working as a reporter that help you now as a fiction writer? And on the surface you may say, well, one is telling what you see, and the other is making up stories. But to me, like, especially in a bigger city where you may have 3 or 4 different newspapers and news outlets, and you all show up to cover a story, and you're going to get 5 or 6 different vantage points on that story because everyone sees it from their perspective, and there's certain details that stand out to you that may not stand out to the reporter to your left or right. Are there any things that you picked up along the way that help you now as a fiction writer?
That's another interesting question. I would say in some ways, being a reporter worked against me because I had to fight the pyramid template for reporting. And I'm old. I mean, I'm 58 years old. So we learned how to write in pyramid style. And that's very different than how reporters write now. So the impulse to get to the end or to get the hook, to get people interested in the story would sometimes work against me in writing thrillers or suspense, because what you really want to do is you want to suck people in a different way. And so I had to fight that temptation to put all the information out there at once. What helps you is just the concept of deadlines and respecting editors. When you have a really great editor, and I've been lucky to have some really great editors, including my current one at HarperCollins, it's there's no you can't be a prima donna. You learn to trash, kill your darlings, as they say, and you learn that you learn to be a little humble, I think, and after being a reporter, because not only have you learned how to be edited, but you've also learned how to deal with public ridicule, criticism. And, that's nothing compared to the world of Twitter now, which I just think is a vicious, vicious place. And I hate it. But it's
a dumpster fire. Let's call it what it is.
It is. It's a dumpster fire. And I've seen really great authors and really people just go down in flames. And it's just, I feel so sorry for them. And I honestly don't know how you survive. So my experience as a reporter really didn't help me that much compared to what's going on today. But I think the biggest advantage is this being able to be disciplined and write and to be edited. And that's, I think, the best. And I think maybe you appreciate a little bit of dialogue. I certainly met some characters along the way. And as a reporter, you always are thinking, oh, someday this will make a great book. This will make a great book. And then when you sit down to write it, you're like, it's not that great.
Sarah, you wrote a series of books, the Bubbles Yablonsky mystery series. Where did Bubbles come from?
Well, that's a good question. Another one. It came from two places. So remember, I've got this illustrious Spiro Agnew Barbie background, right? So that's where I'm coming from. I am not the Iowa's writer's school. It's Barbie was my impetus. So I had her in my brain, and I am from a steel town in Pennsylvania, where it was a steel town once upon a day, called Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I always wanted to set Bubbles, I always wanted to write about Bethlehem. And actually it was a interview I had with Janet Ivanovich, who used to live up here in New Hampshire. And I showed her my Barbie book, and she said, you call her Bubbles and set her in Bethlehem. Boom, boom, boom. Janet used to live right around the corner in Easton, Pennsylvania, where her husband had been a professor. So she was familiar with the area. And that's where I took off. And I loved pink-walled hair salons, back in the day. My mother would go once, she had an appointment every Friday with Mario, and you'd go down to this pink-walled hair salon. Everybody knew everybody. You bought them Christmas gifts. It was just was the atmosphere. So I wanted to replicate that atmosphere. But actually, I have to tell you, so I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but I'll just very briefly say that when I was promoting Bubbles, I would dress up like Bubbles. And remember, I was much younger. And I would go, this is when they put you on book tours, and I went around the country, and I would pack this gel-filled leopard print bra and a see-through leopard top and this big blonde wig and this tight skirt and fishnet stockings and heels. And I would walk into bookstores like that, and that was how I would do my presentation. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was fun. It was really
fantastic, by the way.
But there was a problem in that that's how I landed on the, terrorist watch list, was because I had all these one-way tickets under my author's name, and I had absolutely no ID under my author's name except for my passport. And I guess it was 2002. I was flying around all that summer, and suddenly I started getting stopped and frisked, and I remember at Southwest Airlines, they opened up the top of my suitcase right in front of us. Everybody's going in, marching right past you. They made me drink my water bottle. And then they started pulling out the blonde wig and the leopard print gel-filled bra and the see-through leopard print top. And I also happened to be reading Jennifer Weiner's book, Good in Bed, at the time. So, I mean, it was just not, I was mortified. It was just this humiliation. But that's actually what led to Do I Know You, this book that's coming out on November 30th from HarperCollins, was that experience. So you see, it all flows together, Hank.
That might be one of the best stories I've ever heard.
Dabble is a proud sponsor of Author Stories. Dabble is an easy-to-use cloud-based writing tool that gives writers a way to organize, plot, and create amazing stories wherever they are. Write in our desktop app on your Mac or Windows computer, tablet, or mobile device. Dabble syncs your latest version with the cloud on all your devices. Write anywhere and anytime inspiration strikes. We got you. Dabble is my preferred writing tool, and I think it will be yours as well. Visit dabblewriter.com for your free trial. You have an amazing story idea. You execute the writing and editing flawlessly, and now the only thing missing are readers. We can help you go from author to author superhero with Story Origin. Story Origin is a one-stop shop for marketing tools with a community of amazing authors working together to find reviewers, build mailing lists, increase sales, and collect feedback from beta readers. Everything an author needs, all in one place, from providing review copies or beta copies, reader magnets to ensure you stay connected with readers, easily distribute audio promo codes, universal retail links to send readers directly to the proper point of purchase, or provide direct download links for members of your mailing list. Story Origin has all the tools you need in one easy-to-use site. Use the promo code ASP21 at checkout when subscribing to the yearly plan, and you will get 10% off your first year. This code will expire December 31st, so hurry over and subscribe now. StoryOriginApp.com.
Right.
Not everybody gets to land on a terrorist watch list.
I wish I could land off the terrorist watch list. If anybody is from the TSA is listening, could you please get me off, because I have not been able to get off yet.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing from my perspective. Probably mortifying from yours. I can see that.
It's a real hassle. Yes, I almost have to plan for it. Our son was running in outside Kansas City. He was a two-time All-American. This is the same kid who used to scream from 3 to 8 p.m. And in college, and it was nationals. And so we were flying out from Montreal, and I thought, I'll get out of Montreal. I won't be caught. Nope. Had to stand there, have my luggage all looked through. I mean, that was just 5 years ago or so. And it just never ends. And then on the way back across the Canadian border, I was detained. I've been detained everywhere. I've been detained in Barbados. I've been detained in the Turks and Caicos, at JFK, and at Heathrow, which is where I found out about the super recognizers, which is the premise of this book. But, I wish I could get off.
So from writing Bubbles, which is a mystery series, but with more lighthearted elements, shall we say?
Yep.
To Do I Know You, which is more of kind of a darker thriller, if you want to look at it that way, but definitely with humorous aspects. There's definitely that Sarah Strohmeyer feeling about the book. How do you make that transition from the lighthearted mysteries to the new thriller?
Well, I think, I think I follow what I read and what I like to read. So if I stopped reading kind of cozy mysteries and lighthearted mysteries, and I started reading more complex thrillers or domestic suspense and really like them, I think that the structure of them is a challenge. I think the unreliable narrator has changed everything. And I guess the unreliable narrator is gone, but I just read a book by Michelle Martinez Campbell, who also lives in Hanover. That's excellent, called Stranger on the Beach, with an unreliable character. And I just wanted to outline the whole book just to kind of get the structure in my head. And I think that's I really like following what I love. I know that some people, write romance, but they read thrillers. I don't know how you can do that. I want to write what I'm interested in reading. And so that's how I think I've made that transition. Maybe I just got older. Maybe the world got darker. I don't know. I also think that the whole thriller domestic suspense world just really blossomed in the past 10 to 15 years. It's just really taken off with, Gillian Flynn and a whole bunch of people, Ruth Ware and Lucy Foley and oh God, maybe the best one of them all. I'll come back to her. I think it's just really Lisa Jewell. I think it's just so cool what's going on. It's really, really fascinating. It's challenging to write. It's fun to write, and it's interesting. So that was my motivation there.
Well, you're absolutely right. The genre has exploded over the last decade, and the kind of addition of that's probably not the right way to look at it, of the unreliable narrator, kind of the popularization of that trope, if you will, and I'm kind of making air quotes around trope there.
Yeah.
Definitely kind of upped the stakes of the genre, but also made it more difficult for writers that because all writers are readers, writers who love the genre for themselves that then want to try their hand at it. The stakes kind of go through the roof, because people have already done this.
Right.
How do I carve out my niche in this? And do I know you've got a really interesting premise that you play with, and that's the idea of the super recognizer, which you mentioned a minute ago. First off, what was it that you found out about this? Because I think when I started reading about the book, I had heard this term before, or I had heard that this was a thing that existed, but I didn't really know what it meant and how these people, what it would mean to actually meet someone like that. So how did you get familiar with who these people are, and then when did that start kind of formulating in your mind, there's a story in here that I could dig into?
Well, that goes back to the shoe bomber. When I used to be published by Hotter Headline in England, and they very nicely flew me over there from Houston, and where I was on a book tour to attend a conference. And I guess because I came from Houston, I don't know, there was some sort of, because remember, I'm on the terrorist watch list. I was pretty much surrounded when I got to Heathrow. And these guys came out of nowhere. I mean, they just kind of stepped out of the crowd, and it wasn't the usual, you work your way through the maze of the rabbit warren to get to the table to be interviewed, to go to this. No, these guys came out of nowhere, and they said, "Could you please come with me?" And I ended up in this room, and with these very, very polite, I can't stress how polite they were. They were so polite, security guys. I guess I don't know if they were from Scotland Yard or whatever. And they said, they gave me the same line over and over, which is, no, you're just a random sampling. You're just a random sampling. And proceeded to ask a bunch of questions. And finally, when we were done, I said, we started talking about American security on airlines and the shoe bomber, people having to take their shoes off. And he said, "Oh, you guys are so far behind. We've been dealing with the IRA since forever,
right,
for decades. And we are so many steps ahead of you. We have super recognizers in Heathrow and looking at cameras, and they are around the airport, and they are able to detect terrorists, people who are known, who are even disguised." And so I had this long, fascinating discussion with them about how they'd been using super recognizers during crowds and parades and at airports, anytime there would be a huge gathering and a potential for a terrorist situation, to identify people and pull them out of the crowd. And so that was 2002, and that's just been percolating in the back of my brain. And since then, there have been some articles. I think there was one in the New Yorker. I've just been reading about it. So I decided that the time had come to have a character with this innate ability, and where would that most where would that be problematic in her life, and what would be most frustrating to her? And I thought the most frustrating incident would be where she saw somebody, in this case, the suspect in her sister's disappearance, and no one would believe her. And that was, that would just drive her crazy, and she would know, because she's a super recognizer, she knows who she saw. And for that person whom she identified to be beautiful, rich, and marrying into a wellness conglomerate, kind of like Goop, made her insulated from any scrutiny or interrogation. So that was the basis for Do I Know You? Which it was a lot of fun to have a group of people who are in the wellness business, because I spent a lot of time on that Goop website and reading everything about Goop, and it's still mind blowing and still fun. I really highly suggest checking out their holiday impossible wish list or whatever. I think Colbert does something with it. It's very funny.
That's fantastic. So I love hearing about the beginnings of things from people, and the moment when a story comes out of literally nothing, and then all of a sudden there's the beginnings of a story, and then you as the writer start digging and kind of pulling the story out of the earth, so to speak. But so you've got this idea of the super recognizer. Was there a moment where all these ideas kind of coalesced, and then you say, aha, I now know how to where the story is here, or were you very deliberate in, okay, I've got this super recognizer, now what can I do with this idea? And then you start kind of casting characters to play that. How does that moment of creation begin for you?
I have to tell you, Hank, I am the most inefficient writer. I am I don't want to stereotype people. They say women clean around the house or from the center out or around, and men clean linearly. I wish I could be a linear writer who just thinks of an idea, proceeds to do an outline, and then writes the whole book. What happens with me is that I have to go through multiple drafts before I get to that aha moment. In fact, if my editor is listening to this, in the current book I'm writing right now, I about a month ago came to that aha moment and had to scrap everything I wrote. So I think I'm going to be late. But there is that coalition moment, and this goes back to my theory of the subconscious. The subconscious is this wonderful device and tool in our brains, and it is working constantly. And you can actually give it orders. I have found that you say, look, I don't know what to do with this particular plot point, or I don't know what to do with this character. How is this all going to come together? Subconscious, figure it out. And what I found is that some of the pages I've been writing, which seem to make no sense, or why is this character in Florida, or what happens, why is he in the automotive industry? It all comes together. It's like, oh, that's why that character is in Florida. That's why he runs a chop shop. That's why, the subconscious can kind of bring it together where you're doing the dishes or you're taking a shower and you think, that's it. That's what I want. Yes. Okay, now I get it. And then you furiously outline, you call your editor and you say, no, you say it on a podcast. I'm not going to make that November 30th deadline, Emily, sorry. But yes, so in this case, in this book, what I had originally was, I think I had, instead of the Goop group, I had kind of like a JFK Hyannisport compound. And because JFK Jr. was a figure in my young adulthood, and
sure,
I still love him, and no matter what anybody else says about him, or that he's dead or not dead, he's just cute. But my agent said, after she read that draft, she said, that's just not going to fly. It's just not timely enough, and it's just not going to go. So go back to the drawing board. And then when I went back to the drawing board, I realized how it would all work, and then it clicked. And then, sometimes when it clicks, you really start knocking off about 4,000, 5,000 words at a time. So you can really get in the groove.
So tell me about the characters. Jane Ellison is a super recognizer. Right. And she has a past where some things happened, right, and her unique ability kind of runs headlong into this past mystery. Set it up for us from there.
So like a lot of people with special skills, they are strong. They can be really strong in one area and deficient in another. And I also have found in Jane's case, when I designed her, that that being a super recognizer can be stressful on your mental health a little bit. And I'm not saying that she is an unreliable narrator specifically, but I'm saying that no human being walking this earth is a 100% reliable narrator of their own lives or events, as any defense lawyer knows.
Right.
We all have a version in our brains that we think is true, and that may be 100% wrong. And we're not trying to deceive anyone. That's just really how we see the world, or how we heard a conversation, or how we thought we saw what happened at an intersection. That is what we deal with. In Jane's case, she has gone through some definite trauma. She was 17 years old when she saw her sister, who had been dealing with opiate issues. And this is an issue that's really near and dear to my heart, because for one thing, I think if you maybe read the story yesterday, that 100,000 people have died of drug overdoses during the pandemic. And that is a crisis in our country that knows no social bounds, class, whatever. We have for example, a really big problem with opiate addiction in Vermont. So do a lot of rural areas. And in Jane's case, her sister, Kit, who was a stellar student, had an accident on a gymnastics event, and broke her leg, and was given some OxyContin to get through the pain. And that, you can have three days of OxyContin. Your brain, that's enough for your brain to be primed to receive that kind of drug. And so I really wanted to bring that story into Jane's life, because I think a lot of people are dealing with that. And my own brother, the one who died, when I was at the obit, he had a drug addiction problem, and he died. So I mean, we're a society that is really hurting from people we love who have suffered drug addiction and who are not doing well. And so that's an aspect in Jane's background, and that was enough for her for Kit's disappearance, and also having gone through all the trauma of her being addicted to opiates, for her mother to fail. And so Jane's coming from a very, very vulnerable point of stance. She's very, very much alone, and she's got a boyfriend now. That's good, and she had this job until she recognized this woman, and then she was in trouble. But so that's where, I think that's her history that I wanted to really bring into the story, because I think it adds depth, and I think it adds relatability, and I also think it's true.
One of the hallmarks of the genre is the kind of heavy, weighty feeling of that kind of gets you into the psychological thriller. And do I know you absolutely has that mood about it. But like we mentioned earlier, your kind of signature humor has a way of seeping into the narrative, especially. What is it about including humor and snarkiness in a lot of senses that elevates this kind of story?
Well, I'm glad you said that there was any moodiness to it, because I was afraid that there wasn't enough moodiness to it. I think that first of all, humor is part of life, and we live in a light and dark world. Not everything is completely dark, and I hope that some people have some light. So that's how you would kind of live your life normally. And I've read plenty of thrillers where it's just dark, 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 and I love it. It's just like doing a really intensive jigsaw puzzle. But I also think my instinct tells me that we are probably about to move out of that singularly dark world. I think that probably if you've been reading a lot of thrillers, you're going to be burnt out on that. And Hank, I can only write what I can write. I can't imitate anybody. I can only be myself, and people either like it or they don't. And that's just the way it is. And I completely respect that. And that's my attitude myself. But I have the feeling that if you are if you're writing thrillers these days, you probably want to think about, I don't know if it's lightening them up or maybe adding some other perspectives or multi-dimensions, because I just think we've been down so many rabbit holes. We're going to need another Warren, or we're going to need to come out into the light or something, because it needs to diversify. That was rambling, but does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And to me, it almost makes the book more impactful when you can add a little levity, a little humor, a little snarkiness, because it lets the reader off the hook for a moment, and allows your adrenaline to come down, and then so that when you then hit us with more of the thriller elements, more the psychological suspense elements, they almost hit harder because you let your guard down. And I love that about what you've done here, and I absolutely hope to see more of that in the genre.
Oh, good. Going back to Ivanovich, she did that really well in those early Stephanie Plum books, because she was hysterical. And then she'd have these really violent scenes that were scary. And she was kind of the master of that. I mean, I haven't read a lot of her more recent stuff, but those first few books, you were yanked back and forth, and next thing you know, it was all over, and you were sitting on a couch with Stephanie eating a bucket of fried chicken. It was like, whoa, what was that?
Absolutely. So when if readers are new to you and maybe even new to the genre, what do you think they can expect? What is if there's an elevator pitch for the book, or for getting into these types of books? Maybe not even specifically this book, but what would you tell a reader who is new to the genre that they can expect to experience?
Well, I think what they could expect to experience with Do I Know You is to have a respite to tune out and go into the world set on Cape Cod, in a dark Cape Cod beach, or a beautiful Cape Cod setting with beautiful people, and a sister's pursuit to find what exactly happened to her oldest sister on that night on the beach when she was overdosing and at the water's edge with a mysterious woman. And I think what we all want is a break. We want to be riveted. We want to feel, we want to be part of the action. We want to be part of the characters. We want to be part of their family, or maybe not their family. We want to look inside a privileged, cloistered world, which is definitely in Do I Know You, because of these people who live on an island who've got this great wellness compound. And there's a puzzle to solve, and there's humanity, and there's mystery, and there's deceit, and there's humor. So I think that's what this type of genre offers. I can have a list of recommendations for people of what books to read if they're just getting into this genre. And I think that, for example, Lucy Foley's Guest List, which is a wedding set on what I think is the Blasket Islands off the Ireland's coast, westmost coast, is just incredibly suspenseful, with crashing waves and drunken guests and intrigue around every corner. I think that if you wanted to read something that's really unusual, I would recommend J.P. Delaney's The Perfect Wife, which is about a kind of Jeff Bezos type who creates his wife into a robot. That's in the first chapter. I'm not giving anything away, but that also has an interesting second person recommendation. I think if you're looking for, I've got to read these toxic things. I don't know if you've read it, but there's the Silvia Moreno Garcia Untamed Shore, which is, I don't know if you've read Silvia Moreno Garcia's Mexican Gothic. It's an absolutely great book. She has this kind of noirish atmosphere, so all these books just transport you with atmosphere, hopefully great characters, and a puzzle mystery.
Love it. Well, the new book excuse me, Do I Know You is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, when you download this episode and listen to it, the Do I Know You came out yesterday, so you can run out to your local bookstore, grab it. It's available in trade paperback, so you can buy it and not have to mortgage your house to do so, or pick up several copies and give as Christmas gifts, because now's the perfect time to do that. Also available in Kindle edition. We're going to have links to it in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon. Also audiobook. Have you listened to the audiobook yet, Sarah?
I have not, but I got the really fun assignment of helping to pick the actors, and that was so much fun because some of them I recognized, and I was like, oh my god, I remember. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I don't know if you do too.
Oh yeah.
And they just talk about taking off. Boy, is that taken off? It's just fantastic how they transform books. That when I go back to reading them, I still hear those voices, and that's actually a good thing, I think. Absolutely. Well, go grab Do I Know You today, for either from your local bookstore or in the editions that we told you about. The links are in the show notes. Sarah, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online? Well, I have a website, Sarah Strohmeyer, SarahStrohmeyer.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, same name, Instagram. And in my other life, I'm a Vermont town clerk, so I post a lot about what goes on in the town clerk's office in this small town, and that's actually pretty fun too. So I hope you'll come and visit me at Facebook or Twitter, and I wish I could give you the free candy that's always in my bowl down at the front desk, but I'll try to give you some other candy.
That's fantastic. We'll put links to all those places in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you. Do I Know You is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, don't forget to go grab it today. Sarah, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Well, thank you. This was really, really interesting and fun. I really appreciate it.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
You took a terrible risk tonight.
Why?
You don't know? The first rule.
I was told by a friend that I shouldn't reveal my gift to anyone who doesn't have a gift themselves.
That's exactly right.
Because everyone we tell dies.
Yes, you might have marked me for death.
Made you a target for a ghost. Why can't people know what we can do? What makes it so dangerous? Valerie took up the fireplace prongs and stabbed the logs.
It's called the Great Curse.
Sparks exploded from glowing crevices and drizzled upwards, ricocheting off the black belly of the cauldron, turning into tiny ashes that disappeared up the chimney.
It was cast by a powerful witch over 300 years ago.
Witch? Sorry, but witch? Please, there's no such thing. Valerie closed her eyes. A spoon leapt from Jason's dish and caught him in the temple. He wiped melted ice cream from his cheek. You were saying?
She cast the curse to stop the witch trials.
In Salem? Jason searched his memory.
1692. They burned her alive in the Salem Common. The only witch to be burned.
The cauldron smoked slightly. Its contents had evaporated. A sharp, charred scent filled the room. Wait, said Jason. There were no witches. They were just, victims of religious hysteria, right? So you're saying the witch trials were justified?
Justified? So if a witch did exist, it would be okay to kill her?
No, I just thought... You're right. Never mind.
There was one witch in Salem, at least. A woman with a powerful gift. She only wanted to protect people like us. To give the gifted their anonymity, refuge. She cast the Great Curse as she burned. She proclaimed that mortals who know a witch shall know death. And that is the Great Curse. And it's still in effect After all this time.
Mortal, as in...
Non-gifted. No mortal can know about you, about any authentic witch.
Jason winced. Isn't there another word besides that? She shrugged. So no one can know what I am, what I can do, or else they become a target.
Right. The spirit world will obey the great curse and try to kill them.
The spirit world.
The other realm.
Jason rubbed his eyes. How much of this was reality and how much of this was Valerie's nutty brand of mysticism? He felt himself pulling back, as usual, for fear of contagion. He'd spent his whole life reading science fiction. He hated paranormal tales. This was not his genre.